Hey, Frog fans, welcome in to the Frogs Insider Postgame Show. Jamie Plunkett, Jeremy Clark, Stephen Johnson here, breaking down all the things that happened in TCU's 17-14 win over ranked Houston on the road. TCU moves to 7-4 on the season, 4-4 in Big 12 play. It's TCU's first-ranked win since that Fiesta Bowl win over Michigan back in 2022. They had lost 4 straight before tonight. So big win for the Horned Frogs. Grinded out kind of win for the Horned Frogs, guys. We're going to get into kind of the ups and downs of this game, but first, there have been a lot of things said and a lot of things talked about this football program over the last couple of weeks after these last 2 losses. I know, Stephen, you and I got on after that late BYU loss and really kind of felt like we were at a loss for where this team needed to go in order to get back on track. But guys, a win is a win in this instance, I think, at least to an extent, when you're talking about on the road, ranked opponent, in-state opponent. They got the job done, even though it wasn't pretty.
Yeah, a win is a win. It's a top 25 win. I know some people out there are going to say Houston should have been a top 25 team. They were 8-2 coming into this game, 5-2, 4-way tie for second place in the Big 12. They had won some pretty good games this year. I'm not going to come on here and say TCU played great because they didn't play great, but they did enough to grind out a win. Obviously, when you have 4 turnovers and you still find a way to squeak out a win, that's big. Nate McAlister, we didn't know who he was at the beginning of the year. He's been good against West Virginia, been good tonight, had the game-winning field goal. The defense played a bend-don't-break defense. They gave up some plays to Connor Weigman, gave up a long run, but overall they didn't give up too many huge plays. There was 2 touchdowns called back on offense, so got to get those things fixed. But I told Sonny after the game, and I kind of believe that, and you guys might agree with me, but I felt like this score wasn't indicative of how the game was really played out. I thought TCU but could have won handily without those 2 touchdowns being called back. It could have been a much different score, in my opinion, but this is a much-needed win. Some people may not like the win, guys. Some people may not like them winning 7 games because it may not fit the agenda. Okay, let's just get that out there. You guys can hate me, at me, whatever. Come on, Horned Frog Blitz and start a new thread. I love it. Builds me a new lake house. But I love this win tonight, 17-14. Wasn't the
old lake house?
No, you got to come to Horned Frog Blitz, team. There's 7.
On Horned Frog Blitz is that Jeremy gets lake houses by the more negative the board is, and he's up to like 9 or 10, I think, at this point.
We're closing in on some real estate out in Possum Kingdom, and they've been pretty subtle right now around Lake Worth.
Still waiting for my first lake house.
Yeah, it's coming. It's coming.
I'm coming up on year 3 at HFB, so we'll see. Maybe it's a 3rd year anniversary gift.
Oh man, I'm still over thinking about lake houses, but I think you're absolutely right, Jeremy. I think maybe I wouldn't use the word dominant, but TCU thoroughly outplayed Houston. They look like they were the better team, the more talented team. And I think that's where some of the frustration is going to come from the fan base, not only from this game, but in a lot of ways, this game kind of summed up TCU's season. Really talented, really great playmakers. They have these stretches like in that first quarter where they look like they're a top 20-ish type team, and then they kind of just unravel with the turnovers, decision-making by Josh Hoover, some penalties. But I still think at the end of the day, they did show something. And I know some fans are kind of, upset a little bit on social media that Sonny said they were blocking out negativity and quote unquote junk, but I do think that kind of showed character. This team could have easily folded. You lost 2 games in a row. You're not playing for a Big 12 title. Let's mail it in and go 6-6, go about our ways, opt out of a bowl game, the Armed Forces Bowl or the Independence Bowl. They showed fight on the road. They showed character. Then you met McAlister. This guy went from a weakness to, I think you can kind of depend on him now. He did it against West Virginia. He did it tonight. I'm not saying he can kick a 50-yarder, but the fact that I think he made that field goal had to build a lot of confidence. You're playing without Bud Clark. You have 2 young two young safeties step up, and it was all. There wasn't much of a drop-off. So I think you had Jeremy Payne rush for 100 yards. So a lot of their weaknesses showed again today, but they also showed they could overcome them. The secondary also played really well. I think Channing Canada kind of got robbed on maybe one of those pass interferences. But overall, secondary played well. You were able to establish a run game. McAlister hit the field, but the defense bounced back. I know it's frustrating, but a win is a win. And I think overall the message should be, hey, we show character, we show grit, and we show we're not punting on this season despite it falling short of our expectations.
One of the big stories here today was Jeremy Payne, 100-yard rusher. First time he's run for 100 yards. He grew up 30 miles from this stadium, had a lot of family here today. We've seen him develop quite a bit this season in his second full season playing for the Frogs, just because, it was just, 3 weeks ago against Iowa State, he had that critical fumble late.
Yeah.
And that could have been, for a younger player, a pivot moment where he kind of starts to spiral, maybe doesn't have as much success as he was having in practice, doesn't see the field as much, doesn't, have the kind of game that he had tonight. But due to the injury to Kavorian Barnes, we didn't see Trent Battle really much at all tonight, if at all. And so he was the lead back. Him and John Denman both got their run tonight, and he stepped up in a huge way. He averaged 5.7 yards a carry, 103 rushing yards on 18 carries. Also had a first down reception. His only reception of the day, went for 15 yards. And I just thought he had a really good game overall. And it was very nice to see, even when things were going poorly offensively, even when things looked like the defense was about to kind of give in, TCU never abandoned the running game.
Sure.
They never abandoned the running game. A lot of that was Jeremy Payne. I thought he had an excellent night tonight.
I did as well too, and I think it's you got to feel good for a kid kind of having his first career 100-yard game in his hometown, and it led to TCU getting the win against a top 25 opponent. We've seen him, I think, shown these flashes, and I think, like you touched on, Jamie, this was a game that I think really showed the development of Jeremy Payne. Last year, he was more of a scat back, and he said to himself when he was talking to us earlier about he had to become more patient as a runner. Not looking to always just bust a run outside to kind of pick up those yards. He showed a willingness and an ability to kind of pick up some of those tough yards, 3-4 yards that Kavorian Barnes excelled at. So if I'm a TCU fan, as bad as the running game has looked at times, I think this performance has to be refreshing, not only with Jeremy Payne, but also John Denman. So the future of the TCU running back room, I think, is in a good spot, even after you lose guys like Barnes and Trent Battle.
Yeah, sophomore and freshman tonight leading the way. You had Jeremy Payne, like you said, running for those hard yards. There were a couple times where it looked like he was bottled up in the middle, but somehow he gets out of there, manages to get 4, maybe 5 yards, and all of a sudden a 2nd and 9 that you think is coming is a 2nd and 5 or a 2nd and 6, and those are obtainable yards. But what I really liked about tonight, you mentioned about not abandoning the run game. Everyone has been wanting to see more balance. Everyone's saying everyone's putting this on Josh's shoulders. Yeah, 36 pass plays tonight, Jamie, if I'm right. And yeah, 33 run plays. That's
36 run plays.
36 run plays, 33. Okay. That's about as balanced as you can get. And that showed to me that they had a plan. They had a great script. You're going to talk about it in a minute, I know. But they came out trusting those 2 young guys. I know it didn't work out toward the end with that 4th down call, but you know what? I didn't mind that call.
No,
that deep in the territory with the way the defense was playing up to that point. Giving the ball to John Denman, hey, man, I love to see the confidence that they have in a true freshman. That makes me confident knowing that this guy has a bright future when they know that they can rely on that guy to try to get some good yards. But, yeah, I was very impressed with Jeremy and John, but props to Jeremy for getting 100 yards.
Yeah, and I think one of the big reasons for the success in the run game tonight was, frankly, an area of this team that I've been incredibly critical of most of the year, and that's the offensive line.
Sure.
They have battled this year. They have not had a lot of success, especially in the running game. We've seen a lot of shuffling along that line. This was the 2nd game in a row they went with this starting 5, I believe. Oh, actually not, because Cade Bennett didn't play tonight. But you had Bruno out there at right tackle again, Cooper Powers at right guard, Colton there at center. Remington Strickland had to start at left guard tonight, and then Ben over at left tackle. And I thought that they played incredibly well. They blocked well in the run game. There were a couple mistakes still, a couple things here and there that stood out. But overall, it was a pretty clean game from the O-line. I don't think they had any penalties tonight. The one holding penalty TCU had was on a wide receiver, and so or two holding penalties on wide receivers tonight. But they played well. They kept Josh clean for the most part, except for one kind of zero blitz that came right up the middle, and running back has to block 2 guys. It's an impossible situation there. I was very impressed with the offensive line. I thought they had probably their best game of the year, considering all the adversity they faced this year. And at the end of the day, they were the ones that in that last drive of the game, when Denman got, I think it was 7 carries for 30-something yards, they were the reason that TCU could lean on that run game and lean on Houston's front to come away. And I mean, even though that 4th and 1 call didn't work. I agree with you. I think it was the right call. Book says to go there. But they got the ball back with like 6:20 left in the game. And that 4th and 1 play happened with less than a minute left in the game. They ate 5+ minutes, almost 6 minutes of game clock on that drive. And that's something that we have not seen from this TCU team a lot the last couple of seasons. It was really good to see tonight.
Yeah, I was trying to think of when you said that. I can't think of the last time they kind of just leaned on a team. You know, obviously against Baylor, against West Virginia, they were kind of just holding on for dear life at the end of the game. So I think playing without Cade Bennett has probably been their best old lineman. And this is a good Houston defense. And despite the Cougars losing a bunch of talent to the transfer portal, all their numbers are basically the same. I think they had a better scoring defense right now anyway. So the fact that you were able to kind of match up against this physical defense, they had one of the best run defense in the Big 12, and you were able to kind of do what you needed to do. I think it was another thing I kind of touched on. We've all been very critical of the offensive line, just like we've been very critical of the secondary. But those guys stepped up and stood out today. And I think that's another reason that you got to feel encouraged about what you saw, regardless of the penalties and the turnovers. Look, I know that stuff was frustrating, but just to see this offensive line perform the way it did, it has to give you confidence going into next week against Cincinnati.
What I really liked about the run game tonight and the offensive line play, a lot of the big plays weren't gimmick plays. They were right up the gut. They were between the tackles. So that tells me that the offensive line was doing their job creating run lanes. There was a couple that Jeremy had bounced outside that he got some good yards on, but I think the 28-yarder he had was right up the middle. They created run lanes pretty consistently all night. And that's a good thing to see because, like you said, Baylor was probably the last time I really saw them lean on a defensive line the way they did tonight. But when I look at it going forward, this is the offensive line we want to see. We want to see them consistently play like they did in the fourth quarter, moving the ball, keeping the ball in possession the last however many minutes they had the ball, 5 minutes until the last minute. But this was we're not trying to sound too homerish here. We're talking good about a win. Okay, let's just get that straight. We're talking good about a win. This was things that were needed. This is things that we're going to analyze losses just in wins. And tonight there was a win, and we're going to analyze the good stuff tonight. And I thought the offensive line played really well tonight.
I agree with that. And thanks to the almost 200 of you that are in here watching the show. We always do appreciate you guys joining us post game. If you are watching on YouTube, make sure you like and subscribe. If you're watching somewhere else, make sure that you share it with a friend. If you're watching on hornfrogblitz.com, we love you, even though you say the most maniacal, diabolical, and insane things in the game thread every week. We know that at the end of the day, you guys love this program with all that you've got, and we're very thankful for each and every one of you over on the site. So thank you for being here. Thank you for being a part of this. Guys, let's talk about Josh Hoover's night. You mentioned the turnovers. Just a really strange stat line from Hoover. 24 for 33, so 73% completion percentage. Threw for 293 yards. Threw a pair of touchdowns, both which were really good throws. One to Eric McAlister down the sideline.
Oh, yeah.
One over the middle in the back of the end zone to Jordan Dwyer, who made a fantastic catch. But he also threw 3 picks. He threw it into double and triple coverage a couple times. He had a tip ball for an interception. He got picked he stared down Chase Curtis and threw an interception on a short route out to the flat. It's just another very kind of roller coaster style game from Josh Hoover. And Jeremy, I want to start with you because you were talking a little bit about his footwork, and maybe it's not as clean as it has been in the past, but there's something with Josh right now, and he's just kind of battling through some things. Yeah. It feels like the last month or so.
Yeah, I think there's some things with his footwork, and the reason why I say that is because he's not real consistent where he's having ball placement. There's passes that are high, there's passes that are going low, but the thing that really is eye-opening to me is the high passes. And when you have quarterbacks throwing high passes, 99.9% of the time it has something to do with the footwork. Yeah. Some of it has to do with the release, but a lot of the footwork is where it's at. But I'll defend him a little bit tonight on a couple of those plays. The first interception he had, I love my Hazel boy, Eric McAlister. You guys know this. Yep. He's got to fight for the ball. He has got to fight for the ball better. You're 6'3.5". You're known as a 50-50 receiver. You're earning the trust from Josh Hoover to catch a pass like that. He didn't come down with it. The defensive back fought him. He ended up with the pass. Now, the second one he threw into double coverage, kind of a weird play action style play. It was kind of a weird play from the get-go. But I thought that was kind of forced. He threw it into double coverage. Eric tried to go up and get it. Wasn't landing in his hands, gets picked off. That was the second one. But the one I can't defend Josh on was the one to Chase Curtis. He completely stared down Chase the whole time. Easy pick. Will James for Houston. You got to give that guy props. He had 2 interceptions tonight, 1 forced fumble. He was a maniac on defense. Shout out to TCU maniac. But listen, there was a couple throws too that you guys didn't see it on TV, because when we're in the press box, we watch and we always flip our heads. Let's see what the TV shows. We're trying. We don't see the angle that you guys see at home sometimes. So we might look like idiots posting on Twitter or posting on the board because we don't watch TV as much. But when an important play happens, we'll immediately turn our heads to the TV. There was a play tonight where it looked like Jordan Bailey on TV might have got hit early for pass interference, but we'll tell you right now, sitting in the stadium, you didn't see what we saw on TV. Jordan Bailey was 2 steps behind the defensive back, and that was just an underthrown ball from Josh. And I could say the ball to Eric, the second interception, was underthrow to him as well. But I like the way he bounced back. There's still some beautiful throws. And someone posted on the board, it's crazy how he'll make the most magnificent, beautiful throw in the world, and then you'll see some passes that are just not good passes. He missed Eric on a mesh route that was wide open, the high pass. But there were some throws tonight. Jordan Dwyer's pass that got called back, the touchdown got called back, was a pretty good throw. Great catch by Jordan. But anytime you can have those turnovers, and we'll keep going back to it, 4 turnovers, 3 interceptions, and still win the game and still throw for 293, that's like playing a video game. I mean, you only see those things happen in a video game when you're playing so bad and somehow or another you win. But that's just kind of my synopsis of how Josh played tonight. It wasn't pretty, but he did enough to get the job done.
I thought tonight pretty much summed up the best and worst of Josh. I think you kind of touched on it. Some of the throws he made, the first touchdown pass to Eric, really both of those, well, the first touchdown to Jordan, the other one that was waved off, all of those are high level, maybe the best throws he's made all season. But then you see it kind of bounce back. And I think the thing that I think might be most frustrating about Josh is the decision making. Like the second pick to Eric, he had a step on him, but Josh was late and too much air on the ball. So that's kind of a throw you have to make with anticipation, with kind of advanced timing. Because I think that could have been a touchdown if he would let it go at the right amount of time. Then obviously I do think Eric has to do a better job of fighting for the football. But at the same time, for your Josh, you guys are in control of the game. Do you really need to throw a jump ball rolling to your right, where I think Josh has a good arm, but I don't know if he has the necessary arm strength to really make that throw. And you guys already touched on the third interception. So I think with Josh, regression isn't the word I would use. It feels like maybe not even ceiling. It feels like, as you kind of alluded to, Jamie, like he's trying to fight through something. I think we probably all expected Josh to maybe take a bigger noticeable step this year, and maybe he hasn't taken it. We're still seeing some of those questionable decisions. We're still not seeing the consistency. We know how accurate he can be, but sometimes it just wavers so much from down to down, drive to drive. But at the end of the day, I think he was clearly the better quarterback than Connor Wegman. Even though like Connor had a bunch of yards rushing and things like that, I think he was still clearly the better quarterback. And I think that was a big reason TCU ended up winning the game, because Wegman had some passes, man, that were nowhere near his receivers, like more so than Josh. So like you said, ultimately a win is a win. He did enough, but I think looking back on it, we're all kind of, I think if Josh was a little bit better, maybe TCU would be in a different spot. But 293 yards, 2 touchdowns. Didn't both of his interceptions come like right after the other touchdowns were called off? So like we're 1 or 2 flags away from talking about Josh having a great game, but that's just how small the margins are. I think he still needs to be better, especially against Cincinnati and in the bowl game. But hey, man, a win is a win, like we keep saying.
Last thing on the offense before we move to the other side of the football, Eric McAlister had 4 catches for 79 yards and a touchdown tonight. That last catch of the night, 37-yarder, a beauty down the sideline, put him over 1,000 yards receiving for the season. He's the 6th Horned Frog ever to accomplish that feat. It's the 7th time a Horned Frog has had 1,000 yards receiving, because obviously Josh Doxson did it twice in 2014 and 2015. It's also the first time that 2 different Horned Frogs have had back-to-back seasons of 1,000 yards receiving, because Jack Besh did it last year, and now Eric McAlister does it this season. He has had, just from a program standpoint, one of the defining seasons for a receiver that TCU has ever had, and he's going to be TCU's next wide receiver in the NFL. And it's just been such an interesting season for Eric, because there are these moments where he looks like the best wide receiver in the country. And then there are other situations where, man, he should have fought for that ball a little bit more. Man, he should have held onto that ball in the end zone. And it feels like he's growing. And and we're seeing that growth even in spite of the fact that he's a 1,000-yard receiver. Like, I don't think we have very often a guy who looks at times so finely developed and then still developing, and then the numbers really kind of lean towards developed.
And I think that's what's going to make him very attractive as an NFL draft prospect. I do think he'll have to answer some of the questions maybe about how strong are his hands, how physical is he at the top of his routes or at the top of those contested catches. But I think the ceiling for him is just going to be, I'm not saying he's Jeremiah Smith or anything like that, but I wouldn't be surprised if it comes in the spring. He ends up being one of those guys that, quote unquote, surprises people with how far he's moving up because he's 6'3", 6'4". I know some people might be concerned about how he might run, but he looks pretty fast to me. Maybe not Savion or Quentin fast, but I think he's a bit faster than Jack Bech. I think he's a guy that's shown that not only is he a deep down the field receiver, a deep threat, his ability to kind of pick up those yards after the catch. When he gets the ball, man, he looks like a running back sometimes, even at with his frame, with his length and things like that. So it's been nice when we talked to Eric at Big 12 Media Days. He was very open about what he wanted to achieve. 1,000 yards was one of them. He'll certainly be all Big 12. I'll get to vote on All-American. He'll be an All-American on my ballot. So you just hope that breaking news, he won't be the only one, but we'll touch on that other Horned Frog here in a second, I guess. So I guess my only hope for Eric is his season doesn't get overshadowed because he's not, quote unquote, as big. Like most fans probably know Ryan Williams, but they don't know Eric McAlister. And Eric McAlister is a better player than Ryan Williams. He just doesn't play for Alabama. So I think McAlister's shown he's been one of the best receivers in the country. And hopefully when award season comes around, he gets a lot of his just due.
Yeah, I mean, people have heard me talk about Azle's own Eric McAlister for a long time, and I'm really excited for the season he's having. Bolitnikov, semifinalist, 1,000 yards. That was, like you said, Stephen, a big goal for him this year. Some of the things that he's got to improve on as he gets to the next level, Jamie, catching those 50-50 passes, being a little bit more physical. I think people want to see him get off the line a little bit better on press coverage. Now, when he's getting off coverage, he's one of the best in the country. He's going to run comeback routes. He's a very meticulous route runner, but I think it just speaks volumes about kind of Kendall Browse a little bit because 2 years in a row, 1,000-yard receiver, and Josh Hoover's doing enough to trust him to get him the ball. And this was one of the big questions we had this year. How are they going to overcome losing Jack Bech, Savion Williams, and even J.P. Richardson? And I think Eric McAlister obviously has stepped up this entire year. And in a game like today, we saw Joseph Manjack, 9 catches, 95 yards against his old team. You know that game felt good for him to go out there and have that performance. So, the receivers are stepping up this year for TCU.
I wonder, and I think this is kind of an underrated storyline because he never was officially on the injury report. How much did they really miss, like, Manjack during that stretch, during that skit? Because I think he brings so much as a slot receiver. Obviously, he's more athletic than he's a lot bigger than I think people probably realize. He's not your typical quote-unquote slot receiver. This guy's 6'2", 6'3". Obviously, he's a very physical runner with what he's able to do on those tunnel screens. So I wonder, I think that's an underrated storyline, how much they missed him when he was dealing with, I don't know if it was an injury or something. It sounded like it was a little weird, but I think it was nice to see him back, and I think he made a big impact.
He definitely did. And you think about his impact this year, you think about the fact that Ed Small went crazy from the slot for a couple games before he got banged up and ended up out for the season. And that is such a critically important part of this offense for it to click on all cylinders. And we saw that last season, not as much this year. 17 points, though, overall. A lot of that has to do with the turnovers. It's the third straight game, I believe, that TCU has not eclipsed the 20-point mark. Now, there's still some issues with this offense. A lot of that lies in turnovers. But you got one more chance at home against Cincinnati to maybe figure it out a little bit against a very, very good defense and another team that is likely still going to be playing for an opportunity to get to Arlington, depending on how their game against BYU goes tonight.
They finished with 426 tonight, right?
Yards, yeah.
And so you had a 52-yarder taken back from Manjack on his touchdown. And then how long was the touchdown to Dwyer? So you're teetering at 500 yards of offense.
Yeah.
And like you said earlier, after those plays, it seemed like the turnovers happened right after that.
Mm-hmm.
Just if you fix those little penalties, I question Chase Curtis's call. I know that people were saying you got to be outside the tackle box or inside the tackle box to make that shot block. It was kind of questionable. I asked Sonny about it. He's not going to talk about it. He's not going to get himself in trouble. But I thought it was kind of questionable, that call. Chase's played in college football for 15 years. He knows what he can do and not do. I trust him making that play. I think it was a bad call. I thought there was a couple of bad calls, not to get on the soapbox about refs, but I thought the offense, there wasn't a time tonight. I know it sounds crazy because they only scored 17 points, but there wasn't a point with the way they were running the football, with the way, let's be honest, there was one play that Josh made that was just, it was all Josh looking at IAN on Chase Curtis the whole time.
Yeah.
The other two passes, he's trying to trust his guys into making plays, right? So to me, and it sounds crazy to say this, but for the first time in about 3 weeks, I didn't feel like TCU wasn't going to move the football. Sure. I felt confident in them being able to move the football tonight. Even if Houston ties the game, I felt confident going into overtime that TCU is going to compete and still have a chance to win the game, because I felt like up to that point, the offense was doing pretty much anything they wanted to.
Yeah.
There was a few lapses here and there, but overall, this was a top 25 team. I mean, people are going to say Houston's a bad team, this and that. Who cares? I don't care. This was the first time in 2 or 3 weeks, to be honest, since maybe Baylor, that I felt confident that, hey man, the offense, I feel like they're going to get it done. I feel like if they don't make a stupid mistake, they're going to do enough tonight to win this football game. And you can call me crazy, but that's just how I felt tonight. And they did move the ball. The points didn't look like they moved the ball, but you gotta talk about it. Just, they potentially had a chance to have over 500 total yards against a pretty good team.
Yeah, and the mistakes are going to happen. Obviously, you don't want them to happen in bulk like they did tonight with the amount of turnovers that TCU had. I think when you kind of pull up, and obviously there are going to be things that happen in the middle of football games that you have to be able to overcome, and TCU showed that they were capable of that this evening. I think from a strategy standpoint and from a scheme standpoint, the play calling was much more consistently better tonight. And I think, when we look back at some of these losses this season, decisions to move away from the run game, the insistence on continuing to throw balls out into the flats to big receivers and have small receivers block for them, right? Just those situations that TCU has found themselves in this year where they're putting themselves kind of behind the 8 ball a little bit. I thought the play calling did a really good job for the most part tonight of avoiding those situations. And when you don't find yourself so often in 2nd and 15, 3rd and 12, you're going to move the ball better. I mean, most of TCU's 3rd down situations tonight were like 7 yards or less. And that's so much more manageable than consistently finding yourself in 3rd and very long. And, frankly, the running game had a lot to do with that tonight. We've already covered it. We're not really going to circle back around to that. But I just thought from a scheme perspective and from a play calling perspective, Stephen, it was a much cleaner game for TCU despite the turnovers.
Yeah, just quickly, honestly, for most games, it feels like there's always 2 or 3 plays I'll tweet out. I don't know about that play call, but honestly, this tonight, I thought Kendall Browse, you can't really control turnovers if you're a coach, but I thought this was probably one of his best game plans, even that opening script where you go up 14-0. And I agree with you, Jeremy. It felt like they were really moving the ball at will. There were a couple 3 and outs, but aside from the turnovers and penalties, man, they were their own worst enemy tonight. So it wasn't the Houston defense. So I think I can't call the performance impressive because ultimately the job of the offense is to score points, but it was a great game plan. They executed for the most part. So like I said, encouraging performance all around.
One thing I really liked about play calling, and I'm glad you mentioned it, we tease a lot about the screens and the snap routes and the quick passes, but I thought Kendall Browse did a great job calling those tunnel screens tonight to Manjack.
I like
because they were Houston was giving up that tunnel screen all night long, and give credit to Kendall because he attacked it. There was a couple times where they had run the ball pretty consistently and they threw a tunnel screen out of the blue, and it just looked like Joseph had 3 or 4 blockers out in front of him, and the defensive guy from Houston saved a touchdown. Yeah. But that was a really consistent play all night long, and give props to Kendall for seeing that in the defense and seeing and knowing that they were giving that play up all night long and continue to run it to success.
Yeah, and even on one of the turnovers, right? Even on Jordan Bailey's fumble, that was another tunnel screen that had gotten them down into the red zone, right? They were about to have 1st and goal if he doesn't fumble that football. So I agree. Play calling, I think tonight was one of the best games we've seen this season. Let's move over to the other side of the football though, because the defense, I think, rebounded in a way that maybe we didn't quite anticipate after the beating they took from BYU. Obviously, this isn't as dynamic of an offense, but it's still a pretty capable one, especially on the ground. And TCU's defense bowed up in a way that, frankly, I did not expect, especially with the lack of Bud Clark in the secondary, with the way the corners have been getting beat. The run defense started to crumble a little bit against BYU. And it really just felt like maybe the wheels were completely falling off the wagon on that side of the football. And instead, I mean, they held Houston to, under 400 yards of offense. They held them to, I mean, the running game still got 6 yards of carry, but they ran it 40 times for 230 yards. And then through the air, the secondary had probably its best night of the year against a Power 4 opponent. And really, really impressed with those guys, especially the young guys. And you mentioned them already, Stephen, on the back end of that secondary that had to step into bigger roles tonight. And then Caleb Elarmzor, who I'm assuming was the player you were alluding to earlier. Third game of the year with 15 plus tackles. I asked him about those individual stats after the game. He was really humble about them and said he knows what they are, but he's just trying to get wins. He's probably one of the most competitive guys on this team with just his demeanor when he comes into post games after losses. Really impressive game for him. 15 tackles, 10 solo tackles, 2 tackles for loss. Just another impact game from Caleb Elarmzor.
Yeah, absolutely. I think he's another guy that you got to hope when the award season comes by that he gets his just due, because obviously, like I said, when you don't play for those bigger brands, even when you have 15 tackles, it's easy to get overshadowed by a guy from the SEC or the Big Ten. But I think overall, like you alluded to, I think this was impressive because they had a lot of opportunities where it would have been so many mistakes by the offense, penalties and turnovers. You know, at the end of the third quarter, it felt like TCU was going to lose this game. But every time Houston had the opportunity to take a lead, somehow they ended up coming with a big play. And Elarmzor in particular, look, Dean Connors got him pretty good on that second touchdown by Houston. But he comes back, and I think on the first Houston missed field goal, if he doesn't blow up that toss to Connors that loses like 5 yards and then sets up that long field goal, maybe it's 17-17 or I think 17-14 at that point. So I think he's been one of the best linebackers in America, one of the best performers today. Namdi also had 10 tackles today. So just those two players, that athleticism, the chemistry they have, I think you got to give credit to Avalos for just really dialing up a really good scheme, because I think the run numbers, I feel like they're so skewed just because of some of those scrambles by Wegman. And I guess you could say they should have spied him a little bit more, but then you probably opened up more lanes to the secondary, which played its best game. So, it's a give and take situation. But I think overall, the defense played really well. They didn't let the momentum get to them, the negativity of the offense, the mistakes, and they really bowled up, man. So I think this is, on the flip side, I can understand why it makes fans even more frustrated. This is the best defense Sonny Dykes has had of this era, and it's not going to result in the Big 12 championship, but it did result in top 25 wins. So I think the linebackers played well. You got to give credit to those two young guys that we mentioned already, Julius Sims and Jordan Lester, because they were trying to go right at Jordan Lester on those slot fades. There were at least 3 slot fades, and he had tight coverage on every single one of them. Julius Sims had the interceptions on 4th down, where Houston had a couple weird play calls throughout the game on 4th down, getting too cute. But I think overall, TCU's defense controlled the game. They never let it get away from, despite what they had to overcome from the offensive standpoint.
Caleb smiled in the post game today. It was kind of weird to see that, because he's usually, like you said, after a loss, after a win, he's kind of got that same mindset to him, same tone. And Stephen, he is one of the best linebackers in the nation. He's everyone and I know Jacob Rodriguez is a great linebacker at Texas Tech, but I think it's Jacob and Caleb in the Big 12 that are the top 2 linebackers without hesitation. I think Caleb's going to go over 100 tackles now for the year after this performance. I think he was around 90 something before the year, but they had some. It was another weird stat I looked at. You see 230, and you're like, no, they didn't get 230 rushing yards. You just didn't see it because they did have that long run on 3rd and 7. Connors gets that 54-yard gain, and then Connor Wigman had a couple scrambles where I think he had 2 carries for 38 yards, I think, on 2 carries, so 76 yards on 2 carries. But I thought when they were just playing the run game, they did a tremendous job of stopping the run. They had several plays behind the line of scrimmage. They were running side to side so well tonight. When Houston tried to stretch run plays, TCU was meeting them out there. They were showing that defense of old, that flying to the football. You're not going to beat us to the edge. We're TCU defense. You better be fast because you're not going to beat us to the edge. And that was the kind of defense we saw tonight. They were flying to the edge. Guys like Jordan Lester and Julius Sims coming in, stepping in for Bud Clark. That was huge tonight. Julius Sims, Gil Jackson got a lot of run, but Julius Sims getting that interception, that was humongous. That's a game changer. I mean, that's a huge game changer. A true freshman making that play. So you had true freshman John Denman on offense making some plays. You had true freshman Julius Sims on defense making plays, and that was one of those kids that they were trying to keep quiet, kind of keep him secret out in White House. Let's not don't talk too much about him, Jeremy, because we like this kid a lot. We don't want a lot of people knowing about him. So it was good for the defense. I thought they rebounded really well compared to what we saw against BYU. You didn't know, not just defense, but you really didn't know what team was going to step on this field today because everyone knows they could have melted in. Everyone knows they could have quit. There's a lot of people that were already saying this team has quit on Sonny. And not to change directions here, but that team did not quit on Sonny. That's not a team out there tonight that we have seen that has quit on Sonny Dykes. So let's just get that out in the open air. To me, that is not a defense. That's not an offense, especially defense. That bend don't break. They played really well tonight, and I was impressed. For them to bounce back the way they did against BYU, let's be honest. You and I predicted losses tonight. Jeff predicted a 3-touchdown loss. So there was a lot of us in that same mindset that didn't know, could this team turn around? And they proved me wrong. I'll be the first to eat crow. Hey, I was wrong. Yeah. They showed some things tonight, and hopefully they can continue that. Play their last game against Cincinnati last week. A lot of seniors on this team. It's not technically senior day, but it's the last game in the Carter for them. So hopefully they can turn in a type of performance they did tonight and end the season with 8 wins. Regular season with 8 wins, Jamie.
Well, we'll wait and see. I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves here, but I agree with you that team played their asses off tonight. They fought incredibly hard. They said, I can't remember who it was. I think it might have been Jordan Dwyer in postgame, or Jeremy Payne said that their key word all week in practice this week was strain. Push as hard as you possibly can. Strain for everything that you're doing. And we saw that tonight. I mean, from the offensive line to the defensive line. Devin Deal was everywhere tonight. Yeah. He was a big reason why TCU secondary had the game that it had, because he was creating a little bit of havoc there at times. I thought Vernon Glover played an incredible game. Nobody called his name all night, and that's how you know a corner had a really good night. And I think maybe he's another one of those TCU defenders that hasn't gotten the notice that maybe he deserves for the kind of season that he's had, just because overall the unit hasn't had as much success as maybe folks had hoped. But
Sonny mentioned that Vernon almost got to that kick.
Yeah.
From our angle, we couldn't see it really well, but it looked like he almost got to that kick, so it might have made the guy go wide left.
See that guy out of your periphery kind of bearing down on you. That's going to make you rush a little bit. But, at the end of the day, it was a very impressive game from TCU's defense. Overall, the Frogs get the win. They move to 7-4. They're back at 500 in league play. With some other games out there tonight, it'll be interesting to see kind of where they fall in the standings. But we've got to ask kind of maybe the bigger picture question here is, when we start to evaluate this season at this point, where do we land as far as the overall success of this thing? Because you're right, they haven't stopped fighting. I think they're maybe just like last year, there's going to be some looking back on this year with, man, if we had just, if we had just not blown that 17-point lead at Arizona State, if we had just held that 11-point lead against Iowa State, just those 2 games, it's a totally different year and a totally different season. How do we start going about evaluating this regular season with all of the ups and downs that we've seen from this team this year?
I think it's going to be a little bit more frustrating than last year, because I think they were a little bit younger last year. I don't know if we necessarily expected them to win or compete for a Big 12 title last year. So in many ways, they kind of met expectations. The way they got there was a little bit bumpy. This year, this team was still expected to contend for a Big 12 title. And I think they show why so many people around inside and around the program had that expectation in the first quarter, and even maybe in the first and in the fourth quarter. So I think even if they win next week, I think this will still be a bit of a disappointment, just because of the fact that if you win both these games against Houston and Cincinnati, it confirms that you were good enough to play in Arlington. It confirms a lot of the things you thought about this team. But then, like you already mentioned it, the fact that you blew a 17-point lead, you just needed one stop in Tempe the fact that you probably just needed one stop against Iowa State, and maybe you're in Arlington, maybe you're playing Texas Tech. I think this will feel like a season that maybe it was squandered a bit because, like I said, I think this is the best defense Sonny Dykes has had. They're going to lose a lot of talent next year. Probably Eric, Caleb, Bud, a lot of the guys that have kind of helped this program rise up the last couple of years. So I think they deserve credit, especially if you can get to 9 wins. That'll mean what? Sonny's averaging 9 wins in 3 of his 4 years. And I think objectively that means he's done a good job at TCU. But I think overall, I think the feeling of, man, we were 1 or 2 possessions away from winning 10 games in the regular season. I think that will stick with fans no matter how they finish out the season.
It's crazy how you always think about those possessions and losses. You never do wins because 22, how many times did they win so many close games? And no one ever talked about that. And I'm not defending people's thoughts, but it is. I agree with you, Stephen. You go out and finish beating Cincinnati. If they beat Cincinnati, I think Cincinnati's going to be a top 25 team if they win tonight. So if you finish the season with 2 top 25 wins, what's that immediately going to do? That's going to put people in that space where they're going to say, why weren't they playing this way the whole year? Why couldn't we play this way against Arizona State? Why couldn't we finish this way against Iowa State? And there's always going to be that what if. The way I look at it is, where's this team headed? Because if we look at some of the teams in the Big 12, Cincinnati wasn't talked about really before this year. Look where they're at. Houston wasn't talked about before this year. Look where they're at. Arizona is quietly 8-3 now. Are they 8-3? They beat the brakes off of Baylor today, right? So
I had them on my ballot last week. I saw the vision.
So I mean, who talked about Arizona? So in Arizona State last year, bottom of the Big 12, wins the Big 12 championship. Utah's obviously improving. BYU 2 years ago was 5-7. Look where they're at. Texas Tech. I mean, look where all these teams that, if you look at where TCU was 2 years ago when they were struggling at 5-7, all those teams have improved their game so much where they're being talked about to be in the Big 12 championship. They're being talked about to play in some pretty good bowl games. That's what I want to see. I want to see TCU make that leap to where we can consider them to win 9 or 10 wins every year. And that's where our expectations were this year. I know a lot of people's expectations outside of TCU weren't really that high. Vegas had them at 6.5 wins. A lot of you guys won money tonight. If you bet TCU, you won a lot of money tonight. Yeah. But to us, when especially we go out and we see the talent on the team, we see this was an older team. So when you have talent and you have an older team, you're typically thinking, okay, this is going to be a pretty successful year. 9-4 is nothing to scoff at. But 9 wins is 9 wins. I'm going to sound like Sonny, but winning college football is pretty hard. And if they finish the season 2 top 25 wins, I'm not going to look at it from a perspective, man, they should have been doing this all year. This was a bad season, especially when in my preseason, I think I had them going 10-2. So that's 1 win off of what I expected. But I do want to see I want to see some encouraging things that can change 9-4 to 10-2, 11-1. Go heavy in the transfer portal. Get some guys that you're going to have to rebuild this team, and you got to find those big guys. But it's tough for me to say that 9-4 is a disappointment. But I'm kind of right there in the middle. It's not a disappointment, but it's not great, if that makes sense. I can't get on board either way right now.
I think for me, and I agree with you, I had this team, I think my prediction was 8-4, right? So they're one win away from being right on my season prediction for the regular season. And I think Melissa made this point a couple of weeks ago when she was still on the show. Rest in peace, Melissa. Just kidding. She's in Europe. Happy Thanksgiving. I hope you're not watching.
She's a trooper.
I'm going to get a text. I'm definitely getting a text. Anyways, the way you go about it matters, right? The way you win football games matters. And there in year 4 of Sonny Dykes, I think there are still just some of those inconsistencies with the details that if he can get those things cleaned up, and I think he can, right? Like we've seen him adjust pretty significantly over these 4 seasons at TCU, right? I mean, 2022 was with the backup quarterback, right? The back half of 2023 was with the backup quarterback. Savion Williams moving to running back in 2024. Like, we've seen his creativity at times and his ability to overcome some of the adversity that TCU has had. It's just those little details that kind of keep TCU from reaching that next step, whether it's, making sure guys know their assignments well enough to block up the run well for an entire season. Maybe eliminating 25 to 30% of those penalties throughout the course of a year, so that instead of 7 or 8 penalties a game, it's 4 or 5, right? And you're not shooting yourself in the foot as much on offense, or you're not giving up first downs to a team tonight. TCU gave up 2 first downs on 4th downs tonight because of penalties, right?
Yeah.
And so if you can just get to the point where you're consistently a little cleaner and a little bit more detail oriented, I really do think there's a lot of success ahead for TCU football. But you got to show it. They didn't really show it a ton tonight, although they did show resiliency, which is important as well. But I think there's a way forward here that leads to a lot of successful seasons in the future for TCU football.
Yeah, and I think it's honestly, it may sound crazy, but it's harder to go from 9 wins to 10 wins than it is, I think, to go from like 5 wins to 8 wins, just because it may sound like one game, but as we're talking about, the margins are so thin, man. We could easily be sitting here talking about TCU being a 10-2 team. I think they got like a PI on that 4th down play against Arizona State, and obviously you had a 4th down conversion you gave up against Iowa State. So I think the margins are just so thin to just going from, like I said, man, it's just easy to go from bad to good like they did from 23 to last year. But going from good to great, man, whether it's life, games, football, I think that's the hardest jump to make. But so he gets paid the big bucks. And like Jeremy said, I think you would love to see TCU, and I think they will get some. TCU's done a good job investment-wise, but it would not surprise me if they're like some of these other schools that say, hey, we need to do a little bit more, so we're a little bit more competitive in the transfer portal, so we can make that jump from 8 or 9 wins in the regular season to 10 or 11 like Texas Tech did. But like I said, I think if you win 9 games, that means overall for his tenure, I think Sonny would be averaging 8.8 wins or something like that. Guys, that's a good job, man. Outside of like Ohio State or Alabama, it's been
Nebraska. Bo Pelini.
Sorry, man. I mean, choke you up.
Oh, God. Emotional in here.
Oh gosh.
But no, man, I think objectively, if they finish the season strong, of course, Sonny has done a good job here. Now he just needs to go get back to that great level like they were in 2022.
I agree with everything y'all said.
Jeremy just tried to assassinate me, y'all.
He's really Jeremy's just ready to go home. I think he's ready to get in the car and drive back. Last thing for me before we shut it down for the evening. And it just slipped my mind.
Nate McCashlin? No, we are.
No, it's not Nate McCashlin. What is it?
We're fearing for Steven's life.
We are fearing for Steven's life. I think
Needs
that's what
water.
shook. I think that's what shook this from my mind. Oh, I asked Sonny in postgame because this was an important win for TCU in a lot of different factors, right? It ensured that TCU had an above 500 record against in-state opponents, which did not happen last year for the first time since I believe it was 2013, right? So he got back on track against in-state opponents.
Own in Texas.
Own Texas on the scorebook, right? In the records, own Texas. They hold both the or this was a fertile recruiting ground that TCU comes to frequently to get recruits. It's a Big 12 opponent, right? That was ranked on the road, first ranked win they've had again since their win over Michigan. So in a lot of different ways, this was a critical win for Sonny Dykes' resume and for TCU's resume under Sonny Dykes. So I asked him, do wins like this still matter when it comes to recruiting? You mentioned the portal, and he said, not really. And the thing that matters most is money. We're going to see a lot of money roll off this roster this offseason.
Yeah.
A lot of money. And how they use that is going to be so important to the continued success of this program, because we've talked about it before on this show. The way that they've recruited in certain areas has maybe needs to shift a little bit, especially along the offensive line, although they had a really good night tonight. And so it'll be very interesting to see what their plan of attack is this offseason with some of the budget that's freed up based on what they really need in the portal. Because if they want to have success and build off this season, like you said, Stephen, they got to go out and get a lot of talent.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the stage is set. I mean, it's TCU. I think Sonny's comments were funny, but I mean, it's true, man. Like, I'm not even gonna go there with Texas Tech, but I think Texas Tech has shown that kids will come, man. The investment is there. I remember talking to a defensive lineman from Texas Tech. He said the Red Raiders made him feel very valued when he was in transfer portal. So TCU's going to do the same. And I know money might be the end all be all, but I still think players care about going to a program that has some success. And like I said, if you finish strong like the way we think they can, and you're an 8 or 9 win team, players will still be attracted to that. I think they'll should have a decent number of draft picks. So I still think, developing talent, success on the field, I still think that matters somewhat, even if money is the end all be all. So, it can't help winning 9 games. I think that'll help make TCU be more attractive, along with some of the guys they'll have drafted in the spring.
I'll say the thing that probably makes TCU the most attractive is for transfer guys is playing time.
Yeah.
I think when they got Noah McKinney from Oklahoma State, he's a big time offensive guard pickup. Everyone's talking about TCU in the transfer portal. They've gone and got mostly G5 guys. Now we've seen Carson Bruno and Cade Bennett. Cade Bennett's been one of the better offensive linemen this year for TCU, and they're both from the G5 level. What I want to see is last year they didn't really find an offensive lineman from a P4 level, and the ones they found, they're not playing a whole lot. The ones from last year's class, Rasheed Jackson, Dylan Kinney. So make that investment to go out there and find that offensive lineman. And money is not the end all, but sadly, and just doing this for as long as I have, money is the top of almost everyone's list. Now there are some exceptions. There are kids out there that they do want to win championships. They do want to get an education. They do want to get developed. And those kids that want to get developed, they know college football is not going to last forever. This paycheck they're going to get every year is not going to last forever. But if they get developed and they get to go to the NFL, those big paychecks are going to go a little bit longer. So you got to find those guys. And for some of those guys, they are coming from the G5 level, and you just don't know how they're gonna perform. I don't think anyone could have imagined that the guys they went after this year up front weren't going to play that much. I feel like they were added for depth, but I feel like at least Jackson was probably brought in to compete for a starting left tackle spot. So to me, not to talk bad about Rasheed, but to me, you've got to go out there and find those guys like Noah McKinney, the guys that start at another Big 12 program that you would be on a shadow of a doubt it's going to come in here and make plays, make the offensive line better, because let's face it, they're losing a ton of guys, especially on the interior up front. So that's the big thing to me. He's right. Recruiting is different. This game, this win over Houston is not going to matter one iota to Houston prospects. It's, oh man, don't go to Houston because TCU beat them. It's not going to change, because what's going to happen is, okay, well, I really don't want to go to Houston now, guys. Well, so-and-so is paying me this much money. Well, let's pay you this much money then. So that's what it is. It's like going to a car dealership and just negotiating back and forth, like, oh, what can I get? So that's kind of where recruiting has gone in a lot of ways. And that's why Sonny was so frank with you on that answer. He didn't hesitate. He said, money. It's money. So TCU has some money. They got to go out and spend it. They got to find the right guys to spend it on. There's a lot of holes to fill this class. I think the transfer portal is going to be big for them this year.
Absolutely. All right, I'm going to leave you guys with a number for your guy, Steven over here, 22. Okay. Caleb Elarms-Orr has 114 tackles on the season after tonight. He had 99 coming into tonight. That's how that math works. But he is 22 away from 136. That would tie him with Paul Dawson and Floyd Terrell for 10th all time in a single season at TCU for tackles.
There are guys with more than that.
The 189 from Kyle Clifton in 1983. So I don't know if he's going to get.
That's back in the 80s where they got credited like 30 tackles.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know if he's going to get there, but he could break into the top 10 in a single season. 22 more tackles to close things out.
Kyle Clifton, Bridgeport guy.
And look who's their number one single game tackles. Kyle Clifton
tackles.
with 30. That's going to do it for this episode of Frogs Insider as Steven continues to process some of that information. Thank you so much for checking in with us and watching. Like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel, follow all three of us on social media. You can see mine and Jeremy's writing over at Horned Frog Blitz. You can see Steven's much better writing over at the Fort Worth Star Telegram. And we're going to be back after the Cincinnati game to close out this regular season. We hope you all have a wonderful Thanksgiving with all the people that you love the most in this world. Tell them that you love them. Make sure you spend that quality time with those folks, and we will see you after Cincinnati on Saturday. Until then, go Frogs.